Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. Lots of stories to start the week here. Obviously, some Orioles spring training and some baseball stuff, and obviously the football with C.J. Mosley and the snow video and all that happened with Alex Collins last week in the Ravens. But the Terps are in the middle of their real season, and it was a real season right on up till they got up to Penn State last week. Really rough week for the Terps at State College. They continued to College Park with a very tough Michigan team that might win a national championship this year. Chris Knoche calls all things Terrapins on Terrapins Radio, down the dial and across the way. Had a cold earlier in the week, and I said, you know what, Chris, I'll bring you on after they beat Michigan on Sunday, and that thing goes so well. This is tough times for Turgeon right now. You were coach a long time. He's being brought into this, and the seeding next week, and the tournament next week, and having to get out there a day early. It's a lot different than the last time you and I talked about a month ago when things were really smelling good, and the Terps were a top 25 team. Remember when that was good enough?
Yeah, and I tell you, it's a tough league. It's a pretty unforgiving league, and Terps were in great shape prior to heading up to Happy Valley, and things didn't go well up there. It's a kind of a resurgent Penn State team, and they were playing well. They certainly played very well against Maryland. And then ultimately on Sunday, you touched on it, it's a Michigan team that is going to be really dangerous. It was right around this time last year that Michigan really found their stride and ended up making it to all the way to the national championship game. So,
well, that's a hell of a win by them on Sunday, right? I mean, to come in and beat Maryland. You would say, okay, out there it's one thing, but Maryland defending home turf, the way the building looked, all the alums in, all of that going on, that's a statement win by Michigan for me.
Yeah, and I talked to John Beilein a little bit after the game, and he felt like it. He's also down a pretty critical player in Charles Matthews, but I actually think they're harder to guard the way they were set up with Matthews not playing. The guy who played for him, Livers, gives him a little bit more bulk and is a terrific 3-point shooter. So, they're a handful, and they run great stuff. They're confident, and their point guard was the best player on the floor yesterday, Xavier Simpson. When he went out with some foul trouble, on Sunday, when he went out with some foul troubles, that Michigan was reeling, and the Terps got the lead in the second half. Ultimately, when he came back in, they regained their composure and their stride. So it's funny. He changed the game when he went out, and he changed the game when he came back in.
I said they needed an X for his Z. Chris Knoche joining us here. He is ex-coach Knoche out on Twitter. You can follow him along. Let's back up to Penn State and what happened there. First things first, because I was going to have you on, and you were ill, and they played sick, and I'm like, we'll have you on this week instead of last week. I'm a little shocked with Penn State. Not a little, but enough that there's enough people that live there. Why is that building so empty when they've had a couple signatures? You know what I mean? It's one thing for them to be beating the snot out of the Terps, but to be doing it in the middle of winter and nobody there. I just thought it was, at some point, you want these Rutgers and these Penn States to start to build something of basketball, and I know they're going to get knocked around when Michigan State come in, but Penn State, big signature win a couple of weeks ago, come and beat the snot out of the Terps. Is basketball ever going to catch on there?
That is, I have no idea what's going on up there because they've got some guys. They've got some really good players in the program. I would think they're entertaining to watch if you're a basketball fan. It's been this way forever up there, and I don't know what it is that's cooked into the fabric up there, but it's almost like hoops is something, people just pay attention to when Michigan and Michigan State are in town. It's depressing when you walk into an arena like that, Nestor, a big time. It's pretty much a pro arena, but when you walk in there for the game and they've got the black curtains up around the upper deck, they've already told you that there will be nobody sitting above the lower bowl. And even the lower bowl was only about, half full, maybe 2/3 full. So I don't know what to tell you. I just think it's a difficult job. And Pat Chambers has got some players there. I'm not sure how they went 0-11 in January with those guys, but they certainly have to be dealt with now. They're they're playing quite well.
Well, one thing you would confirm is that when you go out to Nebraska, and Don Marcus has talked about this with me privately, just being a media member, there's some places I haven't been. Purdue was a place I've been, but a lot of these sort of sleepy Big Ten gyms, the barn out in Minnesota, people in Maryland wouldn't talk about the Golden Gophers basketball program 15 years ago. But when you get on a plane and you go to these places, it's a college town, and there are people that are there, and they love the football team. They have the colors. Everything in the closet's red and white. They'll come out in Wisconsin and watch basketball. That's the part that is a little strange to me, because there's so much money, and the network, and the football brand is so big, and the conference is so big. There are places that aren't basketball places that still have a basketball presence on the 15 nights a year when they play games in town.
Yeah, to your point, I totally agree with you. And the building is nice enough. It's certainly a comfortable building. Nebraska, of course, is one of the biggest football schools in the country, and all they ever do is sell out every single basketball game. I mean, it's an event in Lincoln. Beautiful new building, Pinnacle Bank Arena. Great place to see a game. We were at Illinois our first year in the Big Ten, and it was 12 below, and they had 13,000 people in that building. So I don't get it at all, because Penn State's usually pretty. They won the NIT last year, pretty good basketball team. Again, they've got some talent in the program. I don't really understand why people wouldn't go to their games.
Chris Knoche is here. He is ex-coach Knoche. Okay, so on to the Terps and how they played at Penn State and how they played him. Assess this for me from Turgeon's mind, because he's the one getting crushed. You were a coach, and his coaching ability and game strategy, all that gets brought into question every minute of every day until they get to the Sweet 16 and win a basketball game. This feels to me like there's enough talent to do that. I think it's a tough week to be talking about that after how they've played, but they need to rally the troops, go out to Chicago, show themselves in the Big Ten, and get themselves into a seeding where they're not going to see Michigan in the second game, right?
Well, I think right now, and I say this without looking at the standings, it looks like they're going to be in a 4-5 game. They'll be on that 4-5 line, which means if they did get to the semifinals, they would probably play the 1 seed, which I think will probably end up being Purdue. The schedule breaks pretty nicely for Purdue. So, at this point in time, they just have to take care of themselves. They have to worry about themselves playing better. Selfishly, obviously, I would like the double bye for this team, because you're playing, it saves your legs a little bit right away and immediately, inserts you into a Friday afternoon game. I'm not sure that playing Thursday wouldn't be beneficial to them. I just think that this time of the year, too many practice days, or you get a little bit stale. I think you just play whoever you have to play whenever you have to play them. I'm not really that worried about seeding. It's been a good year to the extent that you're looking at a 4 or 5 seed probably, and you've got 12 wins. Perhaps you're looking at 13. And Nestor, if somebody told you before the season that this team was going to be 13-7 in the best league in the country, I think you would have. Any one of us probably would have signed up for it. I think the problem becomes sort of the arc of the season and where you're headed. Prior to this past week, the arc of the season was terrific. So in a macro look, we've come a long, long way from where we were in November and December, and when we struggled against Purdue on the road and Seton Hall at home. But the micro thing, looking at the last 2 games over the last, 6-7 days, it's kind of depressing. So you have to right the ship, and you have to start to play better, and it just happens to start with Minnesota this weekend.
Bruno Fernando, not long for here from all that we feel and see and sort of know about the NBA and basketball. I want to see him dominate a little bit more than maybe what I've seen this week. And I think we start to count on him. And to your point, anybody would have taken 13. Look, anybody would have taken this season to now. But I think the Terps really do get measured in 2 weeks, not right now, and that's where Turgeon and how they will play in the real tournament will dictate how we feel about the season. So it always feels bad when you get kicked in the teeth and you lose a game. You feel like you shouldn't have lost at Penn State, and you lose a game in front of all of your alums at home. It is sort of a low point, but it picks itself back up by the fact that you do have these special players, even if they haven't played all that well this week. Bruno Fernando going into whatever gym you're going to go into 2 weeks from now, I want to see a big night from him and Cowan when it matters. And right now, this week, it's tough to judge them because I don't think they're playing their best basketball right now.
Yeah, and it was an interesting week for Bruno. First of all, there was nobody who played well at Penn State, and there was actually nobody that really played particularly hard at Penn State, which is fundamentally the issue. If you don't match their intensity, you're going to get your ass kicked, which is basically what happened. I thought the team played hard enough on Sunday against Michigan, just didn't play particularly well, and Bruno was a part of that. And, Michigan does things a little differently, and this kind of underscores your point. I remember on a bus trip maybe 6 weeks ago, prior to playing Indiana, we were going to the airport. I think it was maybe after the Minnesota game, and Bruno was commenting to nobody in particular that he remembered how poorly he'd played against Indiana last season and how Morgan had really dominated him in the paint. And Bruno said, if they don't double team me, I'm going to get 30 and 15 in this game. And they did not double team him, and he got 25 and 13. He was just magnificent. Michigan sort of took a page out of the same playbook where they didn't double team him because they didn't want to leave shooters open on the perimeter. And yet Michigan has this enormous center, John Teskey, who is 7'1", 265, and he was able to sort of keep Bruno away from the basket a little bit, made it much more difficult for him to navigate around the basket. Now, nobody else really has a player like that. So I expect you to see the best of Bruno here moving forward. I think that it's incumbent upon him. Anthony Cowan's the same way. And I mean, they're two of the upperclassmen now on a team that's got 5 freshmen in the rotation. It has to fall to them. Those guys have to take the next step and sort of bootstrap this team to themselves. And if they're going to get to where they want to go.
Big picture for you in seeding. You said they're going to be a 4 or 5 seed. If that happens, is that good enough at this point to make you feel like where we are? My fear is they're going to be a 6 or a 7. My fear is fall on your face, go get yourself outed on Thursday night out in the Big Ten, and then you start to fall down the mountain a little bit. They got to start winning some basketball games here to put themselves in a position to be avoiding better teams 3 weeks from now when it really matters.
Yeah, I think there's something to that for sure, and that's why I think if you do get to 13 wins, you do beat Minnesota in this game upcoming. I think that you're going to find the way. When I was looking at it last night, who everybody else plays, I think there's a real strong possibility that you find yourself with the 4 seed so the 4 seed in the best conference in the country. Should probably get you. I don't know. Kind of depends on like you said. Kind of depends on how you're playing coming out of the Big Ten tournament. But I agree. There's plenty of meat left on the bone, Nestor, and you can go directionally. You can go in a couple different ways. I mean, say you beat Minnesota, and then you win a couple of games to get to the finals of the Big Ten tournament. Now this conversation is a lot different than the one,
well, now you're definitely a 4 seed. You might be a 3, if you get lucky.
You might be a 3.
Yeah.
You might be a 3 depending upon what happens elsewhere in the country. So these are pivotal games, and like I said, there's a lot to play for a lot of teams, and Maryland's just one of those.
Chris Knoche here. He is ex-coach Knoche out on Twitter as well. I want to back this thing up for you a little bit, and I know you're at Terps Radio, and I know you coach teams, and I know you're in the area and all that. I know you have lore for the Terps, but I remember being 4 years old when David Thompson hit his head on the backboard, and McMillan and Elmore, and all the years. But what the Terps did this weekend in the homecoming way, and I wasn't even aware of it. And I know you were there Saturday down in South Baltimore for all the plankness and all that stuff. I saw Don Marcus sharing these pictures, and to see Keith Booth standing next to Johnny Rhodes, standing next to Joe Smith, standing next to Rodney Elliott, and all the years of Terpdom, it kind of was a special weekend, even down at the – I was kind of disappointed I didn't go to the arena in the snow on Sunday because I do have a sense of the history of the Terps, having watched them every year now for going on 46 years or whatever it's been since I was a kid. It was kind of a neat weekend in that way, basketball on the court aside. It's been a hell of a legacy, and Gary showing up, it was nice.
Yeah, and the Maryland marketing folks did a really nice job with the event on Saturday night, and they brought back all sorts of guys. There were some guys that came back from the 60s, and certainly the 70s were well represented. It's funny, they brought guys up sort of in generations, and there was a group of guys who came up who had played for lefty, and each one did a better lefty Drizel impression than the guy before him.
I can do a pretty good lefty because, I mean, I watch it. Well, I know, you know, hell, I don't know, Chris. Let him buy us a hell of a ball player. You know, we got to get the ball inside.
That's pretty good.
Hey, that's pretty good, right? That was not bad.
Yeah,
right?
very good.
Yeah.
Very good. But it was really kind of magical in that sense. And then, you know, at one point they brought up the guys who formed the core of the national championship team. They also had on the dais up there with those guys. They had Gary Williams. John Gilchrist was a part of that too. Of course, he played at the tail end of the Steve Blake, Drew Nicholas group. You know, so it was really well done. They also had some really cool vignettes from. You know, of course, there was plenty of video, but they had a piece from Lefty, about 90 seconds or so. Lefty, you know, struggles to travel at this point in time. And
by the way, the speech he gave last year, if you haven't watched that, right?
Yeah.
Like go YouTube up Lefty's speech, and it's as good and as entertaining as anything that's ever been done at any Hall of Fame, I think.
I agree. But they had Lefty, they had Roy Williams do probably 30 seconds or so about, you know, sort of Maryland's place in the history of college basketball. Tom Izzo did a very similar piece. So they kind of touched all the bases, and it was a really cool event. It was nice to see all these guys. You know, I can't tell you the last time I saw Chris Wilcox. He was there. You know, it was a big time
name
thing.
drop for me, Knoche. I name dropped a little bit. I didn't see everybody, but I mean, during the game, they were going in on some players, and some of the guys, like I looked at them, like, who is that? Looks like oh, that's Johnny Rose. You know, like I was like Googling guys' faces because I'm like, they all look like grown-ass men, and we all remember them as 21-year-olds, right? Like
Joe Smith was there with a gray beard, and it was one of those things that was very surreal.
It really was. But it's been 27 years, man. You know? It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, but it was a big time thing. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, it's actually 25 years on Joe Smith, 94. Hey, always good to visit with you. I hope we do it again, and I hope we're doing it longer and later, if you know what I mean. You know, after St. Patrick's Day is what I'm talking about. So, hey, great for having you on. I'm glad you're feeling better, and we'll get the Terps right, get back out on the court, get after Minnesota on Friday, and then take the party out to Chicago next week. Thanks for coming on, Chris.
All right, anytime, Nestor. Thank you.
Chris Knoche, our dear friend, ex-coach Knoche, out on Twitter, and the one of the voices, along with Johnny Holiday on the Terps Radio Network. We'll get the Wiz on next week. I got to chase Johnny Holiday around, too. He's a tough guy to catch. Young guys like Holiday, you can't catch. By the way, Lefty's 87. I was checking his age. 87, the left-hander. Charles Grice, Lefty Drizel. If you haven't checked out that video, make sure you do that. You can find me out on the BuyAToyota.com Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. And, of course, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.